We've been fooled. Going to university is no longer good for anything. It used to be that going to college was buying a first-class ticket to the upper echelon of society, but now almost everyone has a college degree, and let's not even mention unemployment, work precariousness, and low salaries. For many people, studying a degree for 4 years has only served to get a piece of paper that no longer guarantees anything, or at least this is what many people think, especially when the media keep repeating news like this.
Higher education as a path out of poverty is now more myth than reality.
Given this scenario, what can I say? It is to be expected that many people question whether it's really worth going to college. In view of this, it would almost be better to take vocational training, or even leave school to learn a traditional trade. You gain time, money, and after 2 years, you leave with a guaranteed job. Now, to what extent are all these criticisms right? Is going to university really no longer useful? Are other options, such as vocational training or learning a lifelong trade, better? Today on Visualeconomik, we will tell you all about it. University is an investment, and like any investment, it has costs and benefits that are sometimes not so obvious. But let's start by being clear. This graph represents the case of Spain, according to many statistics, the country with the most overqualified population in Europe. There, people who have a university degree earn on average 42% more than those who complete all of high school. But if they also have a master's degree, that figure rises to an extra 83%. The numbers seemed to contradict the mainstream narrative. Going to university is still very profitable, even more profitable than options such as higher vocational training. And take note, because if this were not enough, the salaries of the university-educated population are not only the highest, but also the fastest growing. The reason? Well, basically, going to university allows you to get into highly skilled jobs where you are more likely to be in continuing education. In other words, university students do not stop their education when they get their degree, but continue their education every day while they are working. This gives them access to better jobs where they continue their education. And, well, you know how it goes. It's the good old virtuous circle. Obviously, this effect is not unique to college students. The point is that these workers are often in more complex jobs where this compounding effect of lifelong learning can occur. Take, for example, programmers. Practically every year, they have to adapt to new technologies. AI, new languages, they are very intensive jobs with continuous learning. And yes, it's true that other non-university educated jobs also require constant training, and that there are other university studies that do not require constant updating. However, it is usual that professions linked to university education are more prone to this virtuous circle. In fact, it is precisely this cycle of learning and improvement, and not the university degree itself, that explains much of the income inequality by level of education.
While some jobs are dead ends with few learning opportunities, others offer greater opportunities for skill development.
So basically, if you come out of college without the best job in the world, you don't have to let it get you down either. Chances are that in a few years, you can improve your position a lot. What's more, according to the data, it's likely that over the course of a person's working life, the college premium, that is, the extra money earned for having gone to college, doubles. For example, in the US, it goes from 27% at age 25 to 60% before retirement. So that could explain much of the frustration of many young people just out of college. They simply haven't had time to develop their earning potential. Nevertheless, this does not only affect young people, but also middle-aged people who, in the middle of their lives, decide to undergo additional training. In a study in Denmark, researchers gave several workers who were on sick leave the opportunity to be paid to go to university. Their aim was to see how studies could affect the professional lives of middle-aged people. The result was enlightening. In the long term, these workers were paid 10% more than their former colleagues. Not bad, is it? However, it's both sweet and sour. Working university graduates earn much more than other workers, but they also have a slightly higher unemployment rate than workers with vocational training, particularly among younger workers. It is true, we are talking about a fairly small difference, and it certainly doesn't compensate for the enormous gap in salaries, but it is a fact that exists. After all, vocational training includes activities that are often in high demand on a day-to-day basis. Think, for example, of industrial equipment maintenance technicians, social workers, senior mechanical technicians. Whatever the case, the question still remains. Does this mean that it is worth going to university or not? Well, not so fast, because as we've said before, going to university is an investment. So far, we've told you about its benefits, but perhaps an even more important part is the associated costs. One thing we all know is that college tuition is quite expensive. We are not discovering anything new, but there are expenses that are often hidden and that are even more expensive. For example, it is common for many people to have to leave their family home and rent accommodation to attend classes. In many cases, the costs of relocation and accommodation to attend study can be higher than the university course fees themselves. And of course, another thing that is not often taken into account is the time you waste going to college. For instance, imagine you want to buy a house. To get a mortgage, the bank will ask you for some savings. And if you start working when you're 18 and live with your parents for a few years, you can save enough money. And possibly by the time you are 25, you will have decent savings with which you can become independent. But if you go to university, you will spend 4, 5, 6 years without being able to accumulate savings because you will be studying most of the time without working more than part-time. You will end up 25 years old without a penny to your name, still living with your parents, and without a much better salary than those who did not study. This is known as opportunity cost. And it applies both to savings, to buy a house, and to investments. Because, for instance, all that money a student spends on tuition or moving could be invested in the stock market, in a business, or in any other asset that he or she does not take advantage of because he or she is paying for college. So the decision whether to go to university is something to take seriously. Of course, you can typically recover the investment over time, but there is no doubt that both the opportunity cost and the direct cost are very, very high. However, beyond individual cases, how good is going to college as an investment? Do people really manage to offset the costs of the investment with higher salaries? Well, according to a meta-analysis, the present value of benefits of going to college in the US ranged from $100,000 to $1 million, starting from a cost of just under $50,000. Or in other words, that the benefit of going to college would be equivalent to receiving a transfer of between $100,000 and $1 million. And yes, I know, the range is very wide. The reason is that this estimate depends a lot on factors, such as the interest rate. And what do interest rates have to do with the university? Well, think about it. If the interest rate is very high, that means that instead of investing my money and time into a college education, I could simply start working earlier, save even more money, and invest it in the stock market or in treasury bonds that will give me a very high return thanks to the high interest rates. In other words, the higher the interest rate, the less profitable it will be to go to university compared to other types of investments. So what does all this translate into? Well, to give you an idea, with an interest rate of 3%, the benefits of going to a US university would be $440,000 for the average male graduate. But if rates rise to 5.5%, then this figure drops to $230,000, almost half. That said, most estimates agree that the annual return on investment of going to college would be between 7 and 12% per year. The question is this too high or too low? Well, it's quite a good return. To give you an idea, the vast majority of professional investors are going to get much lower returns on their investments over their lifetime. A 7% return is basically the return that the US stock market has historically given, and a sustained return of 10% means that if you save $100 every month for the 37 years of your working life, you can retire with $800,000 in the bank, having invested less than $90,000. So university is still a fantastic investment. Be that as it may, and having said all this, be very careful because the devil is in the details. Often when people talk about the benefits of going to college, they usually compare the employment situation of workers with a college degree to that of other workers. However, there is a problem with this type of comparison, and that is that not everyone who enters university finishes it. In other words, when deciding whether or not to go to college, you will not only have to consider how your life will go if you get the degree, but how likely it is that you will actually get it. Think about it. If you go to college and don't get the degree, you will have invested a lot of money that will not generate any return. And take note because this data matters a lot. If we have an investment that gives a return of 10%, but suddenly has a probability of failure of only 5%, then the value of that investment drops to 4.5%, less than half. In fact, it is precisely this risk of not finishing college that answers a puzzle that had many economists and education experts confused. The puzzle is, if the college premium has gone up almost 20% in the last few decades, why has university-educated income increased by less than half? And the answer is quite simple. The smartest and hardest working people, that is, those who can get the most out of college, were already attending in the past. But as university becomes more attractive due to, for instance, university-educated salaries growing at a faster pace than the rest, people are entering university who are increasingly weaker students and who are less likely to finish their studies.
Those with low risk of failure experience a large increase in expected returns. Those with high risk of failure experience a much smaller increase in expected returns, and thus remain largely inframarginal.
If we factor in that the best students are more likely to get a better salary, to get a full-time job, and to finish their degree, then according to some estimates, the benefit of going to university can be around double that of a regular student, and directly negative for the worst students. To give you an idea, by regular student, they mean the average student who finishes high school but does not go to university. If this student were to go to college, he or she would most likely end up making a good investment, although probably far from that 12% we told you about earlier. Now, here is another great detail that tips the balance on the side of the university, and that is that the jobs we have named are focused on the USA, but in most European countries, the vast majority of universities are heavily subsidized, which means that you can take all the benefit without paying all the costs. But even those who do not receive scholarships pay a subsidized tuition fee for the most part. And the point is, think about it. There are few cases in which the state gives away so much money. European universities are one of the most important public aids. We're basically talking about a blank check of tens of thousands of euros. In this case, the choice is quite clear. If you think you can finish the degree and get the degree, it is very likely that higher education is the right decision for you. But if this is so, then why are so many people disappointed with the European universities as well? Well, on the one hand, it may simply be a matter of expectations. It's very likely that many of your parents never went to college because in their day, only a very select elite could afford to go. So a lot of parents instilled in their children the idea that a degree would be enough to elevate them to the 1%, and that's not the case. Having a degree these days does improve your salary, but it's not like it used to be. Decades ago, being a college graduate was practically a ticket to getting rich. However, apart from expectations, there is another much simpler explanation, and I'm sure many of you have been thinking about it throughout this video. Not all degrees are the same. An engineering degree is not the same as an arts and humanities degree. For example, in Spain, in the humanities, less than half of the graduates found employment in their field of study. That is, a job related to their degree. Meanwhile, this figure is 70% for engineering and 80% for the health sciences. Or to put it another way, arts and humanities graduates do not formally work in their field. What's more, as you can probably guess, this difference also affects salaries. Following the same example, around 3 out of 10 arts and humanities graduates earn less than 1,000 euros per month, while the highest salaries of more than 2,000 net euros per month are in careers such as engineering, architecture, medicine, or mathematics. Probably a pittance in many countries, but well, this is a Spanish example. We could talk about their salaries in more detail in another video. The thing is that it is true that on average, workers with university degrees get paid more and have more secure employment, but there is also a lot of variability. Many people with non-university higher education, such as a qualification in web application development, international trade, or electronics, are going to have a better job than some university graduates. And by this, we don't mean that there are better and worse careers. They are different options. But if someone is considering going to university, these are data and factors that he or she should consider. Now that we've talked about career selection, it's also worth opening another important can of worms: the university campus. Is it better to go to private rather than public universities? Well, there are many studies that say that attending a very expensive private university does not mean you will earn more money. But then, why do private students tend to end up with better economic conditions? Well, apparently, it's because they were already wealthier and had better grades before entering higher study. At least this is true, unless you were talking about the best universities in the world, such as the famous Ivy League universities in the US, like Harvard or Yale. And of course, not all the benefits of a university education are economic. There are also relational factors, personal development, learning about other people. Without going any further, university can help you break out of your comfort zone, such as pushing you to move to another country. In short, a university education is more than just a financial consideration. There are even many studies that estimate that going to college, regardless of your subsequent salary, can add up to 5 years to your lifespan. So, Visualeconomik community, in view of what we've just said, what was your opinion of university before watching this video? Were you surprised by its profitability, positively or negatively? Do you think there are some careers with too many students? You can leave me your answers down in the comments. And as always, don't forget that here on Visualeconomik, we release new videos every week. So subscribe to this channel, hit the little bell so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like this video, like it, and I'll see you in the next one. All the best. See you next time.